Vignettes by Larry Niven. The year 1977 begat what would become an ongoing series of stories that would run through 2015 and collectively called Draco Tavern. Each tale is told inside the tavern, and 3 vignettes was the first appearance of any of these, and that was in the May 1977 issue of Cosmos Science Fiction and Fantasy magazine. The 3, in order, are also known separately as Cruel and Unusual, The Subject is Closed, and Grammar Lesson. They each next appeared in a collection of the author's stories called Convergent Series in 1979. Then in an anthology called Aliens from 1980. Then in Niven's Laws in 1984. From here on, they appeared multiple times in separate publications until they were reunited along with all the other Draco Tavern tales with the most appropriate possible title in 2006. This channel has visited the tavern before and will surely do so again. Read by Darrell T. Smith II for my channel, Quasar Spectra. 1. Cruel and Unusual. Chirpsithra do not vary among themselves. They stand 11 feet tall and weigh 120 pounds. Their skins are salmon pink with exoskeletal plates over vital areas. They look alike, even to me, and I've known more Chirpsithra than most astronauts. I'd have thought that all humans would look alike to them. But a Chirpsithra astronaut recognized me across 200 yards of the landing field at Mount Forel Spaceport. She called with the volume on her translator turned high. "Rick Schumann, why have you closed the Draco Tavern?" I'd closed the place a month ago for lack of customers. Police didn't want Chirpsithra wandering their streets for fear of riots, and my human customers had stopped coming because the Draco was a Chirpsithra place. A month ago, I'd thought I would never want to see a Chirpsithra again. 22 years of knowing the fragile-looking aliens hadn't prepared me for 3 days of watching television. But the bad taste had died, and my days had turned dull, and my skill at the Lotl speech was growing rusty. I veered toward the alien and called ahead of me in Lotl. "This is a temporary measure until the death of Katashasnif may grow small in many memories." We met on the wide, flat expanse of the blast pit. "Come join me in my ship," said the Chirpsithra. "My meals maker has a program for whiskey. What is this matter of Katashasnif? I thought that was over and done with." She had programmed her ship's kitchen for whiskey. I was bemused. The Chirpsithra claim to have ruled the galaxy for untold generations. If they extended such a courtesy to every thinking organism they knew of, hundreds of millions? Of course, it wasn't very good whiskey, and the air in the cabin was cold, and the walls and floor and ceiling were covered with green goo. And what the hell? The alien brought me a dry pillow to ward my ass from the slimy green air plant, and I drank bad whiskey and felt pretty good. "What is this matter of Katashasnif?" she asked me. "A decision was rendered. Sentence was executed. What more need be done?" "A lot of very vocal people think it was the wrong decision," I told her. "They also think the United Nations shouldn't have turned the kidnappers over to the Chirpsithra." "How could they not? The crime was committed against a Chirpsithra, diplomat by choice, Katashasnif. 3 humans named Shrenk and 1 named Jackson did menace Katashasnif here at Mount Forel Spaceport. did show her missile-firing weapons and did threaten to punch holes in her if she did not come with them. The humans did take her by airplane to New York City, where they concealed her while demanding money of the Port Authority for her return. None of this was denied by their lawyer, nor by the criminals themselves. I remember. The week following the kidnapping had been hairy enough. Nobody knew the Terpsithra well enough to be quite sure what they might do to Earth in reprisal. I don't think the first Terpsithra landing itself made bigger news, I said. That seems unreasonable. I think humans may lack a sense of proportion. Could be. We wondered if you'd pay off the ransom. In honor, we could not, nor could we have allowed the United Nations to pay that price, if such had been possible, which it was not. Where would the United Nations find 1,000,000 Svith in Terpsithra trade markers? The alien caressed 2 metal contacts with the long thumb of each hand. Sparks leaped, and she made a hissing sound. We wander from the subject. What quarrel could any sentient being have with our decision? It is not denied that diplomat by choice Katashasnif died in the hands of the... She used the human word, kidnappers. No. 3 days in agony, then death, a direct result of the actions of Jackson and the 3 shrinks. They sought to hide in the swarming humanity of New York City. Katashasnif was allergic to human beings, and the kidnappers had no allergy serum for her. These things are true. True enough, but our courts wouldn't have charged them with the murder by slow torture. In fact, a good lawyer might have gotten them off by arguing that a Terpsithra wasn't human before the law. I didn't say so. I said, Jackson and the Shrink brothers probably didn't know about Terpsithra allergies. There are no accidents during the commission of a crime. Be reasonable. Next, you will say that one who kills the wrong victim during an attempt at murder may claim that the death was an accident, that she should be set free to try again. I am reasonable. All I want is for all of this to blow over so that I can open the Draco Tavern again. I sipped at the whiskey. But there's no point in that until I can get some customers again. I wish you'd let the bastards plead guilty to a lesser sentence. For that matter, I wish you hadn't invited reporters in to witness the executions. She was disturbed now. But such was your right, by ancient custom. Rick Schumann, are you not reassured to know that we did not inflict more pain on the criminals than they inflicted on Katashasnif? For 3 days, the world had watched while Terpsithra executioners smothered 4 men slowly to death. In some nations, it had even been televised. It was terrible publicity. Don't you see, we don't do things like that. We've got laws against cruel and unusual punishment. How do you deal with cruel and unusual crimes? I shrugged. Cruel and unusual crimes require cruel and unusual punishment. You humans lack a sense of proportion, Rick Schumann. Drink more whiskey. She brushed her thumbs across the contacts and made a hissing sound. I drank more whiskey. Maybe it would improve my sense of proportion. It was going to be a long time before I opened the Draco Tavern again. 2. The subject is closed. We get astronauts in the Draco Tavern. We get workers from Mount Forel Spaceport, and some administrators and some newsmen. We get Terpsithra. I keep sparkers to get them drunk and chairs to fit their tall, spindly frames. Once in a while, we get other aliens. but we don't get many priests. So I noticed him when he came in. He was young and round and harmless looking. His expression was a model of its kind. Open, willing to be friendly, not nervous, but very alert. He stared a bit at two bulbous aliens in spacesuits who had come in with a Chirpsithra guide. I watched him invite himself to join a trio of Chirpsithra. They seemed willing to have him. They like human company. He even had the foresight to snag one of the high chairs I spread around, high enough to bring a human face to Chirpsithra level. Someone must have briefed him, I decided. He'd know better than to do anything gauche. So I forgot him for a while. An hour later, he was at the bar, alone. He ordered a beer and waited until I'd brought it. He said, "You're Rick Schumann, aren't you? The owner?" "That's right. And you?" "Father David Hopkins." He hesitated, then blurted, "Do you trust the Chirpsithra?" He had trouble with the word. I said, "Depends on what you mean. They don't steal the salt shakers. And they've got half a dozen reasons for not wanting to conquer the earth." He waved that aside. Larger things occupied his mind. "Do you believe the stories they tell? That they rule the galaxy? That they're aeons old?" "I've never decided. At least they tell entertaining stories. At most, you didn't call a Chirpsithra a liar, did you?" "No, of course not." He drank deeply of his beer. I was turning away when he said, "They said they know all about life after death." Ye gods, I've been talking to Chirpsithra for 20 years, but that's a new one. Who raised the subject? "Oh, one of them asked me about the, uniform. It just came up naturally." When I didn't say anything, he added, "Most religious leaders seem to be just ignoring the Chirpsithra, and the other intelligent beings too. I want to know, do they have souls?" "Do they?" "He didn't say." "She," I told him. "All Chirpsithra are female." He nodded, not as if he cared much. "I started to tell her about my order, but when I started talking about Jesus and about salvation, she told me rather firmly that the Chirpsithra know all they want to know on the subject of life after death." "So then you asked—" "No, sir, I did not. I came over here to decide whether I'm afraid to ask." I gave him points for that. "And are you?" When he didn't answer, I said, "It's like this. I can stop her at any time you like. I know how to apologize gracefully." Only one of the three spoke English, though the others listened as if they understood it. "I don't know," she said. That was clearly the answer Hopkins wanted. "I must have misunderstood," he said, and he started to slip down from his high chair. "I told you that we know as much as we want to know on the subject," said the alien. "Once there were those who knew more. They tried to teach us. Now we try to discourage religious experiments." Hopkins slid back into his chair. "What were they? Chirpsithra saints?" "No, the Shigupt were carbon, water, oxygen life, like you and me, but they developed around the hot F-type suns in the galactic core. When our own empire had expanded near enough to the core, they came to us as missionaries. We rejected their pantheistic religion. They went away angry. It was some thousands of years before we met again. By then, our settled regions were in contact and had even interpenetrated to some extent. Why not? We could not use the same planets.
We learned that their erstwhile religion had broken into variant sects and was now stagnant, giving way to what you would call agnosticism. I believe the implication is that the agnostic does not know the nature of God and does not believe you do either.
I looked up at Hopkins, who said,
"Close enough. We established a trade in knowledge and in other things. Their skill at educational toys exceeded ours. Some of our foods were dietetic to them. They had taste, but could not be metabolized. We mixed well. If my tale seems sketchy or superficial, it's because I never learned it in great detail. Some details were deliberately lost. Over 1,000 years of contact, the Shigupt took the next step beyond agnosticism. They experimented. Some of their research was no different from your own psychological research, though of course they reached different conclusions. Some involved advanced philosophies, attempts to extrapolate God from his artwork, so to speak. There were attempts to extrapolate other universes from altered laws of physics, and to contact the extrapolated universes. There were attempts to contact the dead. The Shigupt kept us informed of the progress of their work. They were born missionaries, even when their religion was temporarily in abeyance."
Hopkins was fascinated. He would hardly be shocked at attempts to investigate God. After all, it's an old game.
"We heard from the Shigupt outpost worlds that the scientifically advanced worlds in the galactic core had made some kind of breakthrough. Then we started losing contact with the Shigupt," said the Chirpsithra. "Trade ships found no shuttles to meet them. We sent investigating teams. They found Shigupt worlds entirely depopulated. The inhabitants had made machinery for the purpose of suicide, generally a combination of electrocution terminals and conveyor belts. Some Shigupt had used knives on themselves or walked off buildings, but most had queued up at the suicide machines, as if in no particular hurry."
I said, "Sounds like they learned something, all right, but what?"
"Their latest approach, according to our records, was to extrapolate rational models of a life after death, then attempt contact. But they may have gone on to something else. We do not know."
Hopkins shook his head. "They could have found out there wasn't a life after death. No, they couldn't, could they? If they didn't find anything, it might be they were only using the wrong model." I said, "Try it the other way around. There is a heaven, and it's wonderful, and everyone goes there. Or there is a hell, and it gets more unpleasant the older you are when you die."
"Be cautious in your guesses. You may find the right answer," said the Chirpsithra. "The Shigupt made no attempt to hide their secret. It must have been an easy answer, capable of reaching even simple minds and capable of proof. We know this because many of our investigating teams sought death in groups. Even millennia later, there was suicide among those who probed through old records, expecting no more than a fascinating puzzle in ancient history. The records were finally destroyed."
After I closed up for the night, I found Hopkins waiting for me outside. "I've decided you were right," he said earnestly. "They must have found out there's a heaven, and it's easy to get in. That's the only thing that could make that many people want to be dead, isn't it?" But I saw that he was wringing his hands without knowing it. He wasn't sure. He wasn't sure of anything. I told him, I think you tried to preach at the Terpsithra. I don't doubt you were polite about it, but that's what I think happened, and they closed the subject on you. He thought it over, then nodded jerkily. I guess they made their point. What would I know about Terpsithra souls? Yeah, but they spin a good yarn, don't they? 3. Grammar lesson. It was the most casual of remarks. It happened because one of my Terpsithra customers shifted her chair as I was setting the sparker on her table. When I tried to walk away, something tugged at my pants leg. The leg of your chair has pinned my pants, I told her in Lotl. She and her 2 companions chittered at each other. Terpsithra laughter. She moved the chair. I walked away, somewhat miffed, wondering what had made her laugh at me. She stopped me when next I had occasion to pass her table. Your pardon for my rudeness. You used intrinsic your and my instead of extrinsic, as if your pants are part of you and my chair a part of me. I was taken by surprise. I've been studying Lotl for almost 30 years, I answered, but I don't claim I've mastered it yet. After all, it is an alien language. There are peculiar variations even between human languages. We have noticed. Pravda means official truth. Pueblo means village, considered as a population. And all of your languages seem to use one possessive for all purposes. My arm, my husband, my mother, she said, using the intrinsic my for her arm, the my of property for her husband, and the my of relationship for her mother. I always get those mixed up, I admitted. Why, for instance, the possessive for your husband? Never mind, I said hastily before she could get angry. There was some big secret about the Terpsithra males. You learned not to ask. I don't see the difference as being that important. It was important once, she said. There is a tale we teach every immature Terpsithra. By human standards, and by the Terpsithra standards of the time, it was a mighty empire. Today, the Terpsithra rule the habitable worlds of every red dwarf star in the galaxy, or so they claim. Then their empire was a short segment of one curving arm of the galactic whirlpool, but it had never been larger. The Terpsithra homeworld had circled a red dwarf sun. Such stars are as numerous as all other stars put together. The Terpsithra worlds numbered in the tens of thousands, yet they were not enough. The empire expanded outward and inward. Finally, it was inevitable, it met another empire. The knowledge that thinking beings come in many shapes, this knowledge was new to us, said my customer. Her face was immobile, built like a voodoo mask scaled down. No hope of reading expression there, but she spoke depreciatingly. The Elan were short and broad, with lumpy gray skins. Their hands were clumsy, their noses long and mobile and dexterous. We found them unpleasantly homely. Perhaps they thought the same of us. So there was war from the start, a war in which 6 worlds and many fleets of spacecraft died before ever the Elan and the Terpsithra tried to talk to each other. Communication was the work of computer programmers of both species. The diplomats got into it later. The problem was simple and basic. The Elan wanted to keep expanding. The Terpsithra were in the way. Both species had evolved for red dwarf sunlight. They used worlds of about 1 terrestrial mass, a little colder, with oxygen atmospheres. A war of extermination seemed likely, said the Terpsithra. She brushed her thumbs along the contacts of the sparker, once and again. Her speech slowed, became more precise.
We made offers, of course, a vacant region to be established between the two empires. Each could expand along the opposite border. This would have favored the Elan, as they were nearer the star-crowded galactic core. They would not agree when they were sure that we would not vacate their worlds.
She used the intrinsic possessive and paused to be sure I'd seen the point.
They broke off communication. They resumed their attacks. It became our task to learn more of the Elan. It was difficult. We could hardly send disguised spies.
Her companions chittered at that. She said,
We learned Elan physiology from captured warriors. We learned depressing things. The Elan bred faster than we did. Their empire included thrice the volume of ours. Beyond that, the prisoners would not give information. We did our best to make them comfortable, in the hope that someday there would be a prisoner exchange. That was how we learned the Elan secret. Rick Schumann, do you know that we evolved on a one-face world?
I don't know the term, I said.
And you have spoken Lotil for 30 years.
Her companions chittered.
But you will appreciate that the worlds we need huddle close to their small, cool suns, else they would not be warm enough to hold liquid water. So close are they that tidal forces generally stop their rotation, so that they always turn one face to the sun as your moon faces Earth.
I'd think that all the water would freeze across the night side. The air, too.
No, there is circulation. Hot winds rise on the day side and blow to the night side and cool and sink, and the cold winds blow across the surface back to the day side. On the surface, a hurricane blows always toward the noon pole.
I think I get the picture. You wouldn't need a compass on a one-face world. The wind always points in the same direction.
Half true. There are local variations, but there are couplet worlds, too. Around a red dwarf sun, the planetary system tends to cluster close. Often enough, world-sized bodies orbit one another. For tidal reasons, they face each other. They do not face the sun. 5% of habitable worlds are found in couplets.
The Elan came from one of those?
You are alert. Yes, our Elan prisoners were most uncomfortable until we shut the air conditioning almost off. They wanted darkness to sleep, and the same temperatures all the time. The conclusion was clear. We found that the worlds they had attacked in the earlier stages of the war were couplet worlds.
That seems simple enough.
One would think so. The couplet worlds are not that desirable to us. We find their weather dull, insipid. There is a way to make the weather more interesting on a couplet world, but we were willing to give them freely. But the Elan fought on. They would not communicate. We could not tolerate their attacks on our ships and on our other worlds.
She took another jolt of current.
Tss. We needed a way to bring them to the conference arena.
What did you do?
We began a program of evacuating couplet worlds wherever the Elan ships came near.
I leaned back in my chair, a high chair built to bring my face to the height of a Tripsithra face. I must be confused. That sounds like total surrender.
A language problem, she said. I have said that the planetary system clusters close around a red dwarf star. There are usually asteroids of assorted sizes. Do your scientists know of the results of a cubic mile of asteroid being dropped into a planetary ocean?
I'd read an article on the subject once. They think it could cause another ice age.
Yes. Megatons of water evaporated, falling elsewhere. Storms of a force foreign to your quiet world. Glaciers in unstable configurations, causing more weather. The effects last for 1,000 years. We did this to every couplet world we could locate. The Elon took some 24 worlds from us and tried to live on them. Then they took steps to arrange a further conference.
You were lucky, I said. By the odds, the Elon should have evolved on the more common one-face worlds. Or should they? The couplets sounded more hospitable to life.
We were lucky,
the Chirpsithra agreed.
That time, we were lucky in our language. Suppose we had used the same word for my head, my credit cards, my sister. Chirpsithra might have been unable to evacuate their homes, as a human may die defending his home.
She used the intrinsic possessive.
His home from a burglar.
Closing time. Half a dozen Chirpsithra wobbled out, drunk on current and looking unstable by reason of their height. The last few humans waved and left. As I moved to lock the door, I found myself smiling all across my face. Now, what was I so flippin' happy about? It took me an hour to figure it out. I like the Chirpsithra. I trust them. But considering the power they control, I don't mind finding another reason why they will never want to conquer the Earth. You've been listening to pre-1990s speculative fiction readings with a highlight on science fiction by Darrell T. Smith II. Please consider clicking the donation link in the description box. Thank you so much for your time and your imagination.